And then what I've seen recently, really with like younger millennials, older Gen Z, is this interest in the different types of equipment to cook with. So whether it's an Instapot or whether it's an air fryer, then that gives rise to an entirely new sort of convenience. You know, how does my product fit into that? How do I show you how to cook like Korean beef in an air fryer so that it comes out caramelized, crispy, delicious? And so there's a lot of that's stirring around right now.
Hello, meat folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. It's your happy, hungry host, Phil Bass, back with another meat enthusiast, one that is representing the beef cattle world of Texas. We have Dr. Molly McAdams of the Texas Beef Council. Molly, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Phil. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've been on my list for some time. Bucky Gortney, I don't know if Dr. Gortney's listening out there, but he mentioned, a few years back, you got to get Molly McAdams on there. I said, I think you're right. And here we did it. We landed the big fish. So
there you go. There you go. Good old Bucky. He's a dear
right.
So,
Since your current role is very much within promoting beef in the state of Texas, you're the executive vice president of the Texas Beef Council. Maybe tell the folks a little bit out there, first off, what are our state beef councils and what makes Texas Beef Council so special?
Oh, that's a good one. So the state beef councils, without getting into a whole lot of like administrative type detail, I think about, the checkoff. All checkoffs can be a little bit hard to understand because they're all different.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about the beef checkoff is that pretty much every state beef council is different too, which it's really a great thing because they're set up to best accommodate what the need is in that state.
Right.
But state beef councils, there's, I think there's 43 of them now.
Wow.
So there's not one in every state. And sometimes if the state cattle population gets low enough, they may not be able to fund a state beef council, in which case checkoff dollars would go straight to the Cattlemen's Beef Board, which is an administrative arm basically to administer the checkoff dollars. But state beef councils are set up. They predated the 1986 checkoff, which is the federal checkoff for beef cattle. Well, cattle, I shouldn't say beef cattle because dairy cattle pay into the checkoff too.
That's right. Yep. Make beef there too.
Oh, and they're a big part of it, really.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Great partners for us. But, state beef councils it's a little boring, but the primary role that we have is to collect the checkoff. That's why we exist. Our job is to collect the checkoff. So on top of that, though, we get to execute demand building programs on a state level, and that's where it's not boring. It's so much fun. If I were going to say what sets Texas Beef Council apart from other counterparts, it's kind of it's a little bit of a math equation in that Texas is the largest cattle producing state in the country, in the US. So we have a lot of checkoff dollars, but we also have the second highest population in terms of people.
Right.
And it's growing so rapidly here. So Texas is unique in that we collect a lot of checkoff dollars. We put a lot into national and international programs, but we also need to be promoting beef in the state of Texas for Texans and for, kind of Texas expatriates, I suppose, and then who are moving to our state that don't have our food ways and they don't have our culture ways. And so part of what we're doing is making sure that they know about the goodness of beef. That's our job, but that's what makes it a little bit different.
Well, and it is exciting always working with the different beef councils. I've had the opportunity in many different roles to connect with beef councils throughout the country, state beef councils, and of course the national organization as well. I love the missions. You said your job is to collect the checkoff dollars, but I mean, really, we got to do something with those dollars. And so it's,
That's
yeah,
right.
it's out there to promote, it's promoting the product, and
Yeah.
also, promoting research, and getting the message out there. No lobbying, of course, none of that is allowed, but absolutely talking about the benefits of beef, and how to continue to push the product out there in a sustainable manner, fiscally sustainable, very responsible manner. And you're out there being the voice of those cattle producers. So very
Yeah.
important. Yeah,
Yeah. It's
absolutely.
a fun job. It's a calling. It's a passion,
Yeah,
passion industry, really. But it's shared by pretty much anybody I've ever met that works really in the beef promotion industry. We're all pretty passionate about it.
absolutely. Well, you got to be. I mean, it's not hard to be in if
Yeah.
you have it in your blood. So, um, I so currently you're with Texas Beef Council. You've been there for a number of years, but your previous life, I want to shift gears just a little bit because you have experience in the retail world, and so maybe tell us a little bit about that background, and then I'm going to ask you a few questions about what kind of historically what's going on out there, and how are we selling meat in the retail sector.
Yeah. So, interestingly, I've worked for Packers. I worked for a retailer. I was in food service promotion for a little while. Um, we're ranchers ourselves. I kind of look at it as I've really worked in every aspect of the industry. I
You
worked in
certainly
retail
have.
for, yeah, I know. I wouldn't say I was really great at sometimes you just got to get these jobs and figure out that that's really not the job that you want long term as a young person. It's valuable learning. Um, but I was with HEB for a long time. And for people who don't know about HEB, it's a regional retailer, really in the world of retailing, fairly small, but a very powerful regional player because they have a very high market share. It's really an unprecedented market share. They're based in San Antonio, which is we still live near San Antonio now. But I actually got hired away from National Cattlemen's Beef Association to work for HEB as a meat buyer to start their fully cooked line. I had no experience in business whatsoever. I didn't have any experience in product development either, which is kind of funny because I remember when I was getting recruited for the job, I was like, why would you want me? Because I don't have experience in any of this. And as it turns out, it might have been uh, well, I feel like it was a good hire. I mean, I was there for a long time. I had some success at HEB,
Yeah.
but I sometimes wonder if it might not have been, um, if it wasn't a smart idea, who really didn't have these preconceived notions of how things should be, because I was really approaching the whole business as a blank slate. And a lot of what I was focused on at the time was really getting cooked meat out there at retail that was convenient, but also that tasted good. Because I remember back then, that would have been 98, there were cooked products out there. They tended to be very heavily pumped,
Mhm.
almost like a deli meat offering. And I remember thinking, well, I don't buy this because the quality isn't what I expect. And I was able to change all
Wow.
that. And, Christy
Yeah.
Calhoun was my partner in crime because she worked in product development for a major supplier of ours. And I know I made her life a living
Yeah.
hell. I know I did. But we worked together to get really great quality product on shelf and had tremendous success doing it.
Well, I want to back up just a little bit because I love talking on the philosophical side of the business world. And you said something that was very impactful, and I think for the younger folks that are out there listening, and especially maybe for them, but even more so for the people who are in a supervisor role and position
Yeah.
in hiring, don't be afraid to bring somebody on that doesn't live
Mhm.
in that world, because you're bringing a whole new perspective, and we have to have that diversity in thought. And I mean, you were there for a number of years. It's not like they
Yeah.
sent you out the door because you missed the mark the first day.
Uh-uh.
And so
Yeah.
so clearly, if you bring in the willingness to learn and an ability to learn, I mean, gosh, the sky's the limit in any business sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And just the passion. I always had such a passion for product, and a lot of course, a lot of beef.
Yeah.
I've always been partial to beef. and worked in all meats, but it was really beef was my passion. But it's when I left HEB, I was their corporate health and wellness officer, and I was in charge of own brand, the private label.
Mhm.
And the last trip I took, this tells you how far you can go as a meat scientist. So for anybody out there that's thinking this is not a versatile degree, I am going to tell you right now, it is. So my last trip for HEB was going to China, and which I went to China quite a bit. We did a lot of business with China and European countries, but we were in China because we were trying to finalize selections on a line of dolls called the Texas Girl dolls. They were based on the American Girl dolls. And so this is a great story. So I'm in China, and they're really wanting to please us with the offerings. And I was trying to get the hair on the rodeo queen correct. And they told me that I had the highest quality hair package. I said, it's not enough hair. We need more hair. And so finally, I pulled up a picture of a friend of mine who was Miss Rodeo America. And when I pulled it up, I said, this much hair. And they were like,
Yeah.
oh,
Culture shock.
we got our hair, but I
Yeah.
think they tripled the hair on the doll. And I'm like, I need more hair. And that, I'm telling you, our Texas Girl rodeo queen doll had the best head of hair you've ever seen on it.
Well, like you said, I mean, yeah, you never know where life's going to take you. First
Oh,
off,
no.
I had no intention of getting a PhD, and lo and behold, here I am using it every day. But the degree, I tell my students all the time, the degree just shows that you can learn and that you
Yeah,
can think for yourself.
that's true. That is
And
very
and
true.
yeah, you never know where it's going to take you, and who knows?
Yeah.
You're still supporting agriculture with the rodeo queen, and so good job, Molly.
Yeah. It's a great doll. Anyway,
Absolutely. Hey,
yeah.
well, we need to go back and talk to them. If they don't have a butcher doll, we probably ought to get a butcher doll.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. We weren't going that far out on a limb. We
No,
were
huh?
giving it a test and trying to see if these things would work or not. So
Sure. Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Well, back to your retail experience, and you mentioned the private label side of things, and it seems like nowadays you can't go in a grocery store without seeing a private label of some sort. So maybe with your experience and your background, can you tell us a little bit about what has been the evolution of the meat case, and especially with the private label development, and how important is that to a business?
Yeah, well, it is a big deal. I mean, it's a big part of a profitability strategy for a retailer. It's important because and the way we used it, because Texas-based stores, Texas-based retailers, there were a couple of different reasons. But first off, you're not paying. This isn't going to be fair to any of the branded folks out there, so I don't mean this negatively, but a brand tax. And so if you have a nationally branded product, somehow you have to pay for the marketing, the R&D, all of that work that goes into it, and it's going to go into your cost.
Mhm.
It has to. You've got to be able to support those programs that will help you grow that brand, and then that drives loyalty.
Sure.
So with a great private label program, you don't have the brand tax. Now you have the overhead because you have people. So that's going to affect it one way or another, but it automatically will lower your cost of goods pretty significantly. So it gives you a better profit margin. That's one of the reasons that retailers are going to go into it, is because it's a profit play. But the other reason is, especially when you're a regional retailer, you can put products on shelf that are deeply meaningful to your customer that may not be meaningful to somebody in Idaho, for
Sure.
example. There's uh, this is not a meat related product, but a product that we launched. It's a short-term product. It's around the chili season down here.
Mhm.
And it's on shelf right now. And I have some friends that live outside of Texas, and they're like, hey, are those chili, Hatch, New Mexico green chili cookies on shelf right now? They are, and they won't be there for very long.
Yeah,
So
probably not an Idaho thing, but
no, not an Idaho thing. But it gives you a way to connect with your customers
sure.
in a way that is meaningful to them. And so thinking about meat, we had a fully cooked brisket. They still have a fully cooked brisket. So fully cooked brisket, which was really had to nail that Texas brisket, smoked
Yeah.
authenticity, pit smoked for over 12 hours.
Yeah.
Regional sausage flavors are very important down here.
Yeah.
So, we worked hard on things like chorizo, and even, like a cooked ring sausage or a link sausage. Those are the types of things that would be meaningful to someone who lives here or is from here.
Mhm.
But for a company like Kroger is a good example, would they go that deeply regional? It may not work out as well for them in their strategy. They're a big national broadline retailer.
Right.
H-E-B's regional. So the
Yeah.
regionality, the differentiation was a big part of the play. And it was fun because you could find manufacturers who were really interested in giving you exactly what you wanted. That made
Yeah.
it so much fun, that relationship with those manufacturers. I just loved that.
Oh man. Well, yeah, that does sound like a lot of fun. I mean, trying to nail a Texas style pre-cooked brisket in the
Mm.
state of Texas. I mean, that's a bold move right there. But
Yeah,
but if you're able to pull it off, holy cows, what an opportunity.
yeah,
And building that loyalty. Yeah, Kroger being they're based out of Cincinnati, I believe.
yeah,
Yeah, there's probably a disconnect. I'm sure they have some regional managers in the area that can relate to Texas or
yeah,
California or what have you. Um, but in the end, if you are a Texas-based company with with the heart and soul of the state right there, you really can connect to your customers, and building that label builds that loyalty. Um,
yeah. It
and that
absolutely
applies to
does.
big and small outfits
Yeah,
out there.
yeah. Yeah, it does. And, and I mean, Kroger is, man, they are an outstanding retailer. There's no
Sure.
doubt about it. Those guys are good. And they have an outstanding private label program too.
Yes.
But that sophistication has grown since, I mean, it was in place when I joined HEB in 98, but I think that we really built it into a powerful engine that's still going strong. I love to see what gets launched in own brand, and it surprises and delights.
Yeah.
You're in the grocery store, you're like, "Oh, what's this?
Yeah.
I need to try this." So, and they nail it. They nail the Texas consumer, as does, I mean, Trader Joe's is another great example.
Yes.
Hell, 80% of what they sell, maybe more, maybe 90% of what they sell is private label, and boy, do
Yeah.
they do a great job too.
They do. They do.
Yeah.
Build that connection. And
Yep.
I always remind folks out there, if I'm either consulting or talking to folks who are looking at building a new business or anything, either whatever you do, make sure it's consistent and good value. High quality is usually a good target as well, but as long as it's consistent and good value, you'll build that loyalty back to your brand. So what have you seen as far as, something that we talk about on the meat side of things? And I don't know if we've quite hit it yet, but the convenience
Mhm.
sector, and how do we continue? And I'm still thinking about the traditional meat case, but how do we target our customers to help our businesses produce something that's more convenient to prepare? It's not scary. It's something that folks want. Is that something you might be able to riff on a little bit?
Yeah, and it's nonstop. That's nonstop work. So if somebody thinks they made it, um, they just haven't been around long enough.
Right.
Because what happens is I look at it in terms of the way consumers hit life stages.
Hmm.
So our son is 20 and he plays football in college, and he and his roommate got an apartment this year. And so watching those two move out of the dorm and into an apartment, and now they're thinking about how they're going to cook for themselves. So before he went back to school, um, because they knew they were going to cook some more, I was like, all right, let me show you a couple of things that are inexpensive because they
Hmm.
want to save money
Hmm.
and that are going to be really satisfactory. And of course, with those guys, it was all about the protein too, because I'm
Sure.
like, you guys need a lot of protein. You're
Yeah.
breaking down muscle, you're building muscle up.
Hmm.
But that's a life change, right? Where they were in the dorm, they were on a meal plan, they didn't have to worry about cooking for themselves.
Right.
So all of a sudden, here they are, where it's almost like they've truly moved out because now they are going to cook for themselves.
Yeah.
Um, But that happens again, let's say you get married, or you have a partner and you start to build a family together. And then you're empty nesters and you're going to go through another life change, right?
Mhm.
So every time consumers hit that plateau in their life, they are in it's a transition period that is either an exciting change or it can be an intimidating one as well. And as a marketer, an educator, a promoter, you always have to hit those consumers when they hit that point in their life and give them solutions. So
Mhm.
convenience will never be fully explained. Like
No,
you
that's a
constantly
great
working on it.
answer. I love
Yep.
that answer.
You'll never be finished. And once you realize that, it gives you the stamina to think about, man, are you serious? I've really got to work on this one more time. I thought I had it solved. It's never solved. And then what I've seen recently, really with like younger millennials, older Gen Z, is this interest in the different types of equipment to cook with. So
Yeah.
whether it's an Instapot or whether it's an air fryer, um, then that gives rise to an entirely new sort of convenience. How does my product fit into that? How do I show you how to cook like Korean beef in an air fryer so that it comes out caramelized, crispy, delicious?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of that's stirring around right now. But what I've seen as far as excellence and where I think that there can be more, I've really seen a lot of focus on kind of these semi-prepped meals that are available where they've been put together. There's a protein, there's a side, maybe there's a sauce that goes with it,
Uh-huh.
and you either microwave it, in which case it's really, really convenient,
Yeah.
or maybe all you have to do is cook it off. And of course, HEB does a hell of a job with it, so we buy that a lot because
Uh-huh.
now it's just me and my husband, and we're done. I
Yeah.
mean, there's no mess, but they have put so much energy into that. There's still a lot of work in the meat case when you think about, I look at it broadly. Sure, you can think about pre-cooked. You can think about somehow partially prepared. Maybe it's diced, or maybe it's marinated. But when you look at how far we've come from, let's say, I'm going to take this back to the checkoff real quickly because the checkoffs had a lot to do with this.
Mhm.
Let's go back to 1986 when the checkoff passed.
Mhm.
And it would not have been uncommon to see product that certainly had a half to maybe 3/4 of an inch of fat on it.
Yep. Yep.
Not even a question.
Closely trimmed,
Right,
right?
closely trimmed. And now after muscle profiling,
Yep.
there are so many cuts that are denuded. They've been muscle seamed, they're boneless, they're denuded,
Mhm.
and consumers have learned. They have absolutely adopted things like, the sirloin cap, culotte picanha, whatever you want to call it, the tri-tip, which Californians have known about forever, and I think they're
Sure.
sad that other people figured it out. Um, but even things like, like the Denver steak, or I'm kind of sad that the Terrace Major never really took off, but we called it the Terrace Major,
Yeah.
which inevitably is like, well, of course,
It's the
where's that
scientific
go?
name. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, and in food service, it's still pretty popular, but
Yeah.
yeah, in the retail side, never really got a hold.
It didn't, and I think it was probably a little pricey, but man,
Sure.
that's one of my
Oh yeah,
favorite
great
cuts.
piece of meat.
Great piece of meat. But even looking at then cuts that can be more versatile,
Yeah.
or you learn how to cook them differently, or you can swap out, right? Beef prices are high right now. So what does it look like to know I used to buy ribeyes and now I'm going to swap to a center cut sirloin?
Hmm.
What am I giving up? How do I need to cook it differently?
Yeah.
I think that all fits into convenience too.
Yeah.
It's certainly ease,
Yeah.
but it's also knowledge, because think about your own life. It's so much easier to do something when you know what to do with it.
Yeah.
That
When you're
automatically
familiar with it.
lowers the
Yep.
blood pressure.
Yeah.
So it's constantly going on, and I expect to see a lot more of it. I mean, frankly, when I think about the beef carcass, we have a huge opportunity with the beef round. It's
Mhm.
always been a challenge.
Yeah.
And that opportunity still exists. We really, it's a big complex. The cuts are huge,
Yeah.
and sometimes they don't cooperate the way we want them to. So that's a big push right now internationally. How
That's
do
a
you
very
think?
that's a very diplomatic way of explaining the round, but
Uh,
don't cooperate as we
oh,
would like.
no, and they have so much promise in the case. You look at it,
Yeah.
it's like, oh man, it looks just like a tenderloin. Oh,
Nope.
that is no tenderloin.
Well, and that's interesting. I couldn't agree with you more with everything you've said. One thing I'll add is that there was an experience I had. This was back in my early days of graduate school, and I remember being at one of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association winter conferences, and I had a chance to listen to a former Walmart meat executive, and they were talking of it had a lot to do with muscle profiling and everything. And he said, people like convenience and prepared and prepackaged kind of things, but you know what we found? Ease of cleanup.
Oh yeah,
That's a home run. And what's easier to clean up than grilling? Right?
it is.
You close the lid. When I always joke like back in our undergraduate times. I mean, we would eat directly off the grill. I
Yeah,
mean, so we didn't even have
yeah,
dishes to clean.
right, right.
So yeah, and it's amazing how much from the muscle profiling on the beef side to the advancements in pork and poultry. We're looking at more of grillable, easy, maybe skillet type, easy to prepare,
Mhm.
quick meals.
Yeah,
Anytime we think about that, and any when you reference the old cuts that we would used to see in the meat case that are just they're dinosaurs now. I like to think of like the 7-bone roast. I
yeah,
love the 7-bone
I do
roast, but you
too.
can't
I
even
miss it.
find it anymore,
No,
right? No, but the
can't
other thing
find it.
about the 7-bone roast is you had to have a family of 13 to work through the darn thing, and you had to have grandma over there who had a big enough pot to cook it in. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, so much has changed, convenience, and then what I like to talk about is especially when I'm doing meat cutting demonstrations, is let's cut this thing to make it look like what people will see in a restaurant.
yeah,
And what a
yeah,
difference that makes. Like you said, the center cut top sirloin is an excellent experience, is an excellent example. You go if we have any of our cattle producers out there listening, you guys have a freezer and you go out the freezer and you pull out the top sirloin steak and it looks like it came off of a brontosaurus.
yes,
And it's the size of a dinner plate. Well, that's not how you're going to see it at a restaurant. And that's
no,
not how it should be presented at a retail grocery store. Now, for the freezer beef, fine, that's for your family. But we're trying to sell to the greater population, and yeah, I think we've come a long way with just using the knife to our
yeah.
advantage, and
Oh,
make it
for
pretty,
sure.
make it pretty.
Yeah, and I think that it's also a good testament to you know, we're such a slow moving industry in so many
Yeah,
ways.
yeah,
Because it's enormous. But when we do make these changes, they can be a little bit methodical, a little plodding, but it takes someone that's got some gray hair to look back and go, we have come a really, really long way.
yeah,
And we have in the beef industry, it is monumental, the changes that we've made. I'm very proud of them. I think
yeah,
it's a great, it shows that we truly care and are responsive to consumers. Takes us a while, but you know, we've made some monumental changes in my lifetime. And, I mean, I'm not that young, but I'm not that old.
yeah,
I think about some of the guys that are already retired and are well past retirement age and looking back at their careers at how much they've seen change over their careers.
yeah.
So I always try to look at it historically.
Yeah, well, and my graduate student Claire, she's experiencing that firsthand right now, interviewing some of these folks and seeing how the world has changed. And so,
Yes.
man, I love this. I love this conversation. I always like to ask. We're starting to get ready to land this thing, and I always like to ask our guests, how'd you get started in the meat world? How did you become Dr. Molly McAdams?
Well, you know what? I started as an art major at a private school. Let's start
Naturally,
with that.
naturally,
Yeah,
yeah,
well, I mean, that seems the most likely way to go. And my dad was a horse vet. I grew up around racetracks, showed horses, hunter jumpers. I mean, just to clarify, Florida girl,
Mhm.
because people will ask me sometimes, well, could you do X, Y, or Z? I'm like, no, I rode horses that jumped over fences
Yeah.
under exceptional control. Um, so I I didn't like I knew that my first year of school experience was not really what I was looking for. So I go up to University of Florida, and my roommate was I lived with a woman who worked for my dad, and she was I think a first year vet student. And then I was thinking same thing that everybody does. I was like, oh, I'll major in animal science. I'll become a vet.
Yeah.
And then I took Dr. Dwayne Johnson's meats course.
Yeah.
And
Legend. Legend.
I know, I love him so much. He's so funny, so smart. Oh my gosh, one of the most brilliant. And Roger West was there at the same time. Just some
Yeah.
really brilliant scientists and good people. And I found that, like, hey, this is practical. I can be in production agriculture, but not be out there truly in production agriculture. And then I took more courses. I fell in love with it. And then, just took some different jobs in the meat industry and realized this could be a really good career. And then clearly it took me to China to pick hair for a doll. So it's
Yeah.
not like I only did meats. It's just a good I stumbled into it. I really did. And
Okay.
I try to give young people the solace knowing, like, you may not have all the answers, but if you just keep, like, thoughtfully experimenting and trying to get closer and closer and closer, have a little grace with yourself
Yeah.
and give yourself time to try some things that don't work. I decided pretty early on that I didn't want to work in a meat packing plant,
Hmm.
you
Sure.
know,
Yeah. Yep.
um, but I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
Um, I've got that experience. So,
Yeah.
just a journey like
It
everybody
is.
goes on.
It's an adventure, and you gotta embrace all those different steps. And yeah, you sometimes working at a place that isn't a great fit for you is the best thing for you, because then
Yes.
maybe I don't need to go down that road again. But you take that experience and you move along with it, and you bring that
Yeah.
to the next task, right? So.
Yeah.
Well, Molly, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate you sharing your perspective, sharing about the state beef councils, which that's really important part of the industry, of the greater industry. And so let's stay tuned. And I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Phil.
Absolutely.